Welcome to On Behalf of, where I, Dara Kalima, the community poet, chat with folks who speak on behalf of their respective communities. Today's guest, what can I tell you about today's guest? I guess this is actually the guest that I know the least of before bringing them onto the show, which should be exciting because we will both get to learn about this person together. But I met them in an online open mic, and someone said, if you want to be interviewed, let them know. And they threw their hands up, and we made sure we would get them onto the show the moment that I actually started going back into recording. So I'm super excited to learn so much more about this person. They already seem super dynamic and fun. So let's find out more. New friend, tell me about yourself. Tell me your name. Let's start there.
Hello, my name is Nayma Chamchaoun, and I'm a British Moroccan self-taught author. My poetry collection was published in October last year, and I'm very active in the writing and poetry open mic scene.
Awesome. So, hey, Nayma. So what are your pronouns?
My pronoun is she.
Awesome. So you already told us about yourself. Is there anything else we should know about you?
Gosh, I love literature, I love poetry, and I've just been so blessed to be part of the writing and poetry community internationally.
Awesome. So what communities do you represent? Like, what communities are you part of?
Well, I mean, I think, my writing probably comes from the community of female voices in the diaspora. And I think, it's something that a lot of us as women in the diaspora community, we struggle with, that kind of feeling of belonging where we kind of connect with both cultures, but we don't completely belong to either.
Awesome. So wait, where are you living now?
I live in London.
So you live in London. You are from, I'm sorry, repeat where you were from again?
Well, I was born in London, but I'm originally from Morocco.
So you're Moroccan, you were born in London, you're a woman. Okay. So you got all these communities that you're part of. Do you have any fandoms or anything that we should know about? And you're an author. Are there any fandoms we should know about too? Or like you're a fan of anything or anything fun?
Well, I mean, I love travel because I think, sort of one of the most amazing things about being a writer or a creative is that we are stimulated by visual beauty and beautiful experiences. So I always try to push myself to travel and see as much of the world as I can.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so then which community are we specifically talking about today?
I think the community we're talking about today would, I think probably the one that I have the most knowledge of would probably be the Islamic community within, I suppose, a Western country where you're kind of raised in a very old-fashioned traditional way, which kind of clashes with your environment.
Oh, wow. So then, okay, I don't even know where to start with that, but that's amazing. And does that mean you're in the middle of Ramadan then?
Oh yes, currently it is Ramadan over here. So yeah, so that's a tough part of the year. I mean, I was in Morocco just as Ramadan started because I spent 3 weeks in Morocco networking with my book and meeting creatives in Morocco. And I think the first day of Ramadan, I was actually in Morocco, and I was like, okay, so I'm here now, and everything is shut, and everybody is fasting.
Oh, wow. Okay, awesome. Wow. Are you fasting as well? Not, you can say no, it doesn't matter. I'm just curious.
I'm not fasting, no. I don't practice. I mean, I was raised within that faith, but I mean, I don't practice because of my own experiences with it, where I found it very restrictive for me.
Understood. So you were raised in London. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, sure. I mean, London, I mean, I've always loved London. It's always had, a close place in my heart, but I think it's also been certainly very difficult, maybe in the 80s and the 70s when I was growing up, where there was still a lot of racism towards immigrants and people who weren't typically European looking.
Yeah, I was just talking about UK and probably London specific, and also Scotland, about their their different brand of racism, probably, because there's maybe a majority of people there that don't look different. Therefore, it makes it easy for them to forget that um, they may not be immune to racism as well.
Yeah, I
Um,
think this is the thing. Sometimes, you kind of get so comfortable in your country of residence, you kind of forget that, well, you're not necessarily viewed as typically British by a lot of people.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because I had gone to UK in 2019. So I went to we did go to London, we went to Wales, and then we went to Scotland. And so it was a very interesting experience. I went with my friends who are Chinese, and I was the Black person with them. And so it was an interesting trip to, I mean, everyone was lovely, but it was still like, hmm, okay. I remember getting very excited the first time I saw a Black person walking through the streets. They
Yeah,
were another tourist. It was very
yeah.
clear.
I think there are some parts of the UK where that is still very unusual.
Yeah. I mean, my friend is also living there, and she's now a dual citizen there. But I saw someone that wasn't her. I was like, oh, there's someone else here. Oh, they're a tourist. I can tell they're a tourist.
Yeah. I mean, my sister lived in a part of the UK which was predominantly white, and I think she mentioned where people would say, "Oh, where are you from?" And she'd be like, "Oh, I'm from Morocco," and they'd be like, "Oh, how exotic!" And I was like, "Exotic? That's an interesting word."
Yes, yes. I love the word exotic. We use it a lot here in the States too. So, so how did you get to keep your culture having grown up there?
I think I kept the culture because it was a culture I was raised with at home. I mean, certainly my upbringing at home was traditionally Moroccan. We observed the month of Ramadan. My parents used to pack us into a car every year and drive us down to Morocco for the summer holidays. So, I
Wow.
think we were always in touch with that part of our culture.
That's awesome. That's really how far, like I'm American. Our geography is garbage. Everyone knows this. I'm not hiding it. So how far away was that? How long of a drive was that? I have
That was
no.
3 days drive through France and Spain.
Ooh. But that's amazing also that you get to see France and Spain doing that. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm thoroughly jealous of you now. And yeah, also am not jealous because I don't think I could drive 3 days.
I always said to my mother, I don't know how you managed to drive for 3 days with 4 children in a car. I think, that my nerves would have been shredded by the end of that.
Yes, that is a thing of saints. 18 hours, I think, is the longest drive I've ever done. I've done 2-day driving, but as a kid, I and my god sister and I didn't get along. So God bless my godparents for doing that. Yeah. So and so you're tell me about your writing. How does your life's journey show up in your writing?
Well, my collection, COVID, The Wordy Wiles of a Mind Under Lockdown, it was written during lockdown. I think it was probably the first time I've returned to writing for a very long time. I mean, I used to love to write as a child, and I kept a journal as a teenager, and I've always enjoyed reading literature and poetry. And then I got married when I was 17, and it was a very unhappy marriage. And I think maybe it probably killed off any creativity I had. So I didn't write for a very long time. And then COVID happened, and I was stuck in a house with two angsty teenagers, and started menopause, and my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So it just kind of felt like everything was coming at me at once. And then I started writing, and I suppose it was kind of a therapeutic tool in that it was a way for me to kind of dissect my thoughts and make sense of them. And then I think once I had enough poems, I sent them out to everybody and anybody who would accept an unsolicited manuscript. I think after about almost a year of rejections, I was thinking, this is not going to happen for me. And then, I think, at the midnight hour, I got contacted by a publisher who was interested. And I was like, oh gosh. So yeah,
Wow.
that was kind of how the journey started. And then I think, I just got back into writing, and I remembered how much I loved writing.
Wow. There's a whole lot in that. And so let's add some communities into that. You're a mom, and you're a caregiver. I'm taking it, for your father.
Yes, I am. I'm the main carer for my parents.
Wow. Yeah. My hats off to you. I am now stepping into that role a little bit. So yeah.
It's kind of strange, because you kind of like raise your kids and all your kids are grown up, and you think, okay, so now I'm raising my parents. So
It is a weird dynamic. And I
it
have
is.
0 kids, and that was kind of deliberate. And now I have an adult childish thing going on. It's a very weird dynamic. And I keep being told, well, remember who the adult is, or who the
Yeah.
parent is. And I'm like, no, you're always going to be the parent, mom.
It does feel
But
sometimes like a role reversal, definitely.
yeah, it's it's interesting. We don't get guides. I mean, there's resources, but we don't get guides for like these phases in our life.
No, unfortunately, no. They're kind of just like sort of like forced onto you, and then you think, right, okay, what do I do now?
Exactly. And then by the like, there's no like, and then this may happen, or this is the next stage of life, so that like you're not, we just like get blindsided, and then it's like, oh, here's a million resources, but you're like, wait, what? Huh? What am I supposed to do? So it's
I mean,
very
it's
interesting.
very overwhelming, and I think especially sort of with, I suppose, cases like dementia, where is this called the long goodbye? You're watching the person that you knew sort of gradually be erased in front of you.
Yes, my grandmother had it, and so I definitely can relate to that. Like, and I wrote poems about that a lot before. So yeah, yes. So that said, so tell me more about your poetry. Is it like, what type of poems do you write? What type of writing do you share?
Yeah. Yeah. So the book itself is not about COVID specifically, but about a shared experience, which was a global experience, because no matter where we lived in the world, we were all experiencing lockdown. And I think it wanted to sort of kind of look at the things that we experienced during that lockdown. So it does touch on, think for me, I mean, it touched on things like duality and identity and sort of like cultural belonging, but it also touched on themes like feminism, on world events. I mean, there is a poem there which touches on the rise of Trumpism in America. And there is a poem also in a collection which touches on the use of food banks, which we saw a lot of here. People were struggling to make ends meet, and they were driven to use food banks. So I suppose it was kind of an observational collection of a multitude of things that we experienced during that time.
Mm, wow. So then, do you think the role of a poet, what do you think the role of a poet is, or a writer is? I'm just
I,
curious.
I think, sort of the role of the poet is to give a personal, emotional account of an era. Historians will give you the dated account and the facts, but if you want to know what it was like to actually live through that period, then certainly poetry, it allows you to tap into the emotions felt during that time. Whether we're looking at poetry written today, or whether we're looking at poetry written by the war poets or by the beatnik poets who opposed Vietnam, or Alec Baldwin and his ideas on, segregation and racial inequality in America. I think they give us a personal voice and experience into that time.
Yeah, that's always a question that people grapple with, but I'm that's always that's my answer too. But I'm always intrigued by people's answers to that question, because some people will say that that's not the case, and I'm going, but even if you're fighting to do that, if you're fighting against documenting the time, you are still responding to the time in which you're in.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're trying to, if the time is terrible, then you're trying to write the happy stuff, then you're still responding to the time in which you're in, because you're trying to do the counter to what you're experiencing. So like that's my feeling of like now you're doing the escapism from the reality. So I feel like that's my feelings, but I was intrigued to see, especially given that your whole book is around the experience we shared. And I think that's really cool because I feel like a lot of people generated a lot of writing during the more, like, I still like to think the pandemic is still happening even though all the restrictions are lifting. But a lot of people wrote a lot more when we were locked down, but that doesn't mean that they were really observing what was happening outside of themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting perspective in your book. So now, does your Moroccan culture feed into your writing as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think, sort of there are poems that explore, I suppose, origin and sort of identity. But I mean, I also use sort of Derija words, or well, which is Moroccan Arabic. I use Derija words in some of my poetry.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. There's like, I was talking about a group of people that I worked with in the past, and what made me sad about their writings that everything was written in just like English, and there was nothing from their culture in their writing. Their writing was beautiful, but like there was nothing from their language, their religion, their culture, their smells. Like there's nothing that was showing up that wasn't just like a cultural marker. And it was making me sad when I realized why I liked their writing because it was beautifully written, but I was sad because there was no cultural markers showing up. It was all very westernized writing. And I was like, but you're not a Western culture. Like, give me something more that's tangible to you so I can learn about you and not just
Oh,
nature, flowers, and broken heartbreak.
I mean, I get that. I think, even for myself, I think for a long time, I kind of distance myself from Moroccan culture because I had a lot of kind of negative experiences with it growing up. And I think probably only in the last 5 years where I've started traveling back to Morocco and I've kind of rediscovered that connection with the motherland.
Mm.
And I think that probably shows up more now in the poetry that I've written more recently. Is the love and that connection that always calls us back to the motherland.
Mm. So are you also sharing that love with your children?
Oh,
I mean, I know
absolutely.
they're
My children
teens, but
absolutely adore Moroccan culture. I mean, they were raised on Moroccan cooking and sort of like Moroccan tea and all of the sort of trimming. So yeah.
awesome. Okay, just making sure. You know, it's important. But I love his culture. I love learning about culture. I love um learning about other people's cultures and practices and faiths, and the more you learn about everyone else, also the better you get to be, just in terms of appreciating people, but you may even learn more about your own faith that way. I always say that I became a better Christian by learning more about my Muslim and Jewish friends and their faiths. So it's like seeing their practice and learning about that. It's like, wow, why am I not like this my way? Like, so it's always like just wanting to like appreciate more. So
Absolutely.
what's something beautiful about your community?
Was something different. I would say probably the hospitality is that they are so warm and welcoming. And, I've noticed it when I go back to Morocco, they will call you Bint Bledi, which is daughter of my country. And, and it's such a beautiful thing to hear when you go back and you just feel like you're being welcomed back into the family. And I think, even the way they speak, it's very affectionate and very lyrical and almost poetic. Like I just sit down and listen to them talking all day long.
Oh, that's awesome. And were they welcoming of your writing as well? I'm just curious,
Oh,
like, was that
absolutely. They were like, oh wow, a Moroccan writer. This is like a voice for Moroccans all over the world. And I was like, yeah, I mean, they were very supportive. I think I did an interview with Moroccan writers in Morocco and an interview with Moroccan poets as well, who published one of my pieces in their magazine. And it was just so nice to me, I suppose, that side of Morocco, where the talent, I mean, because it is brimming with talent. Unfortunately, Morocco is a country that doesn't necessarily invest as much money as it should in the talent because there is so much there.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Is there a unique fact that you can share?
What's a unique fact? Well, let me think. Sort of Morocco is it's certainly an Islamic country, but I kind of like that they have a lot of old superstitions which come from pre-colonial eras. One of their one one of their most well-known characters is Aisha Kandisha, which is supposed to be like a female spirit who seduces men and drives them to madness.
Yes.
And she's supposed to have crazy hair. And I think I was called a couple of times in Morocco. I was called Aisha Kandisha.
Wow.
I think because of my crazy hair. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'll take it. But it's fine. If you want to call me Aisha Kandisha, I'll go with it.
Has she ever showed up in your writing?
I have actually. I wrote a poem about kind of Moroccan folklore and mythology.
That is awesome. That is awesome. It's yeah. When I was new, so I used to do theater, and in that time I did a play about Mami Wada, which is a god who, like, I don't want to describe her incorrectly, but she's a water god, sort of, and sort of like how we would sort of talk about a mermaid, but not that same way at all. And so Mami Wada comes up into some of my poems every now and then.
Wow, that's amazing.
So yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
I
I
love it
love all of
when,
these old myths and stories. I find them fascinating.
yeah, and it's also just beautiful to see us empowered because so often
Absolutely. You have like
we're
strong women.
disempowered. Yes,
Absolutely.
be afraid of us, please, please. So, is there something that's frustrating about the state of your community?
I think, that something that's frustrating, I suppose, is that I guess, I'd like to see, more female voices heard within that community. And I think, there are some amazing and intelligent women in Morocco, but unfortunately, it is a kind of a very traditionalist culture where you're expected to get married, have children, and so when you do that, your career is sacrificed for looking after your husband and your children and everything else. So I think I would like to see probably women aspire to more than just be a marriage and children. I mean, if that's what you want, then that's perfectly fine. But just be aware that that's not the only pathway in life.
No, I get that. I get that. So does that show up in your writing too? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it does. I suppose I explore that aspect, because I have been married and I have had children, but I think for me, because at 17, that was the only option presented to me.
Mm. Were you like, was that a love marriage or was that your family's
No,
choice
it
to do?
wasn't.
Okay.
It was a one that was arranged by my parents.
Yeah. Like some of those go really well and some of those do not. Like it's
No,
so fascinating how,
not for it didn't for me, but like you said, for some it does. I mean, my parents was an arranged marriage, and they've been together 60 odd years. So
yeah, I think like somewhere along the way, the process of choosing has like not worked out so well lately.
yeah,
Like I know some people who it's worked for, and then others are like, no. And I have a mentee who's she's Bengali, and at one point she was like, I will never let them, and then she's like, I will let them, and then ultimately she did not. But she
yeah. I
found
think
someone.
marriage is hard enough, but I mean, when you also have like a culture clash as well, where I'd lived my whole life in London, and my partner had lived his whole life in Morocco, and he had very fixed ideas about how women should be. I think it
Yeah,
was a very difficult.
yeah,
It was a very difficult marriage to make work.
that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Yeah, those the cultures are very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that being that could just, like, yeah, that's the recipe for failure. It would have been easier if he was also here or you had already been raised there,
Yeah.
because then y'all
Definitely.
both have some fundamental similarities. Yeah, again, I love culture. I'm very obsessed with everyone else's cultures.
I
So,
mean, like I said, I love so many things about Moroccan culture. That, I mean, if I gave you one example, it would be one year when I was in Morocco and one of my father-in-law's neighbors died, and the family was very poor and they couldn't afford a burial. And basically, the whole area went around raising money from door to door to get enough money to bury him. And I just thought that was such a wonderful and heartwarming thing to see.
that
So
is
I think,
beautiful.
these are the kind of aspects of Moroccan culture that I love, the community that comes together to help.
That is very beautiful. That is, like, that's how it should be, ideally that's how it should be. And I'm glad they were able to do that. Um, I guess that's our version of a GoFundMe now, but it's not the
Yeah.
same thing. um, but I think it's beautiful that could happen and that everyone came together for that. It's a nice sense of community. I think that's being lost in many ways here or
Yeah.
there, I guess. I don't see that other than GoFundMe, which is very digital and very cold because you don't get to know
Yeah.
the people who are really
No,
chipping
I
in
mean,
for
you
you.
don't see that. I think, a lot of the time in probably Western cultures, most people don't even know who their neighbors are.
I mean, it's funny because someone was like, "Yeah, I've lived here 20 years." I was like, "I've been here 30. I've never seen you before in my life, sir." And we're on the same floor.
Yeah.
Never seen this man ever, but I'm never around or I'm locked in my door in my apartment. So yeah, I know the two people next to me. I think one person doesn't even want to know that I know that she's there. So it's a funny thing about neighbors and how insular we are now.
Yeah.
So can you share a fun fact about yourself?
Okay, yeah. Fun fact about myself. Gosh, what is the fun fact about myself? Is I probably pushed myself this year probably more than I have, in that I decided to do a 3-week travel across Morocco and see all of the places that I'd wanted to see and I hadn't seen. And I
Oh,
was kind of a little bit nervous because it was probably the first time I was traveling in Morocco alone without a friend or a family member. And I thought, how is this going to play out? But, I had the most amazing time and I really pushed myself. I was, I was going to the top of mountains, and these were all things that probably, if you'd asked me before I traveled, whether I thought I could do them, I probably would have said no, I can't. But it was like when I was there, like every challenge that presented itself, I was just like, yes, let's do this. I'm gonna do this.
that is awesome. I lost part of that answer. I'm so mad. It like froze and then sped up, and I was like, no. It was like you said something about a mountain. Did you say something about a mountain in that answer?
Yeah, we
Okay, that's the
climbed up
part I
like
lost you on.
12-foot mountain dune in the desert.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Oh my goodness. I'm so like jealous. So where's your favorite place that you've traveled? I mean, outside of Morocco, because we know Morocco's
I mean,
amazing.
outside of Morocco, let me think. My favorite place that I've traveled, I think probably one of my favorite places was Trinidad and Tobago.
Why?
When I went there, I just loved the people. The people were so
Mm.
warm and welcoming. The food was amazing. The weather, the beaches. I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah. It's a place I want to get to at some point. It is a place I want to get to. I've always loved the steel drum, except for a lot of people I know who are Trinidadian can't stand it because they've heard it their whole lives.
Oh no, I mean, I loved it. I loved the steel drums. I loved the more relaxed pace of life. People seem less stressed than in London, where everybody is hassled and harassed with stress and problems. People just seem a lot laid back, and I loved that.
Yeah. I definitely want to get there one day. Awesome. Is there some place you want to get to that you haven't gotten to yet?
Gosh, I think maybe somewhere in Asia. I kind of like the idea of the Philippines or
Mm.
Thailand. I mean, that's a part of the world that I haven't reached yet. So yeah. Or even explore Africa more. I mean, I've been to some places in Africa, but I mean, I'd certainly like to sort of see more of Western or Eastern Africa.
Mm. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been I've barely been anywhere. So I need to get to some more places. Like London and Wales and Scotland was huge for me. I am going to Dubai next
Oh,
month.
wow.
So I'm very excited about that
I
one.
bet you can't wait.
Yeah, I'm going for a friend's wedding, but I'm super excited to just like go to Dubai and be in a totally different place.
Oh, you'll have an
Um,
amazing time.
I hope so. I hope so. I need a vacation. I need a break. I need a vacation. So I'm trying to think. We've covered so much so quickly. It's like it's funny because you're from London, you speak quickly, you're very short in your statements. It's like speaking to a New Yorker and we're like, here's the answer, done. And I'm like, wait, how do we blow through these questions so quickly? So I'm trying to think of other things I want to know.
I could always share a piece if you like.
Well, I'm definitely going to ask you to do that. That's not even, that's, whenever I have a poet on the show, I make the poets perform. Like, of course, I'm the community poet. I got to get my poetry fill. But I'm still just curious about your writing process. So you stopped writing and you came back into writing.
Yeah.
Was it only during COVID that you started writing, or what got you back into writing?
I think, I started writing probably, seriously during lockdown. Probably before lockdown, I did a couple of things where a friend of mine used to have like kind of an online, was it like an online advice column, and then he would ask me to sort of write something up and then do it on a podcast or on a weekly basis. And I used to kind of do that. And my son would sometimes come across it and be like, "Oh, mum, you writing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, kind of, but not really." So, but I think I didn't really sort of focus on it as much until lockdown, I suppose, because during lockdown we were experiencing so many different emotions. And I think, and that includes, I suppose, the rise in mental health, which we saw quite a lot of due to being confined.
Yeah, yeah. So do you only write poetry or do you write other things then too?
I write poetry. I'm in the process of sending out my second manuscript and finishing my third manuscript. But I'm also writing a novel about my parents' journey to the UK as well. So I seem to have a lot of things on the go at the moment.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about these other two poetry books coming out? What are
Okay,
they
well,
focused on, or
the manuscript I've sent out currently is called Saging Not Aging,
okay.
and I'm still waiting to hear back on that. The third manuscript is called Moroccan Murmurs, which has kind of a Moroccan theme going through each poem, whether it's a connection through my father or it's a connection through travel or whatever. So that's the third manuscript I'm working on. And the novel I'm working on, which I suppose it covers my parents' life because it is very interesting. My grandfather served in the Spanish Civil War under Franco, and my father served in Vietnam under the French. So there is quite a lot of interesting history there as well. So that's the novel I'm working on at the moment.
So how did you get this family history? Like, has it been just passed on to you? Like, did you have to do research? I'm
No,
so
it was
fascinated by
passed
this.
on to me because my father doesn't even know his age because when he was born in Morocco, he was born in the country and they didn't necessarily document age. So I mean, I knew that he'd served in Vietnam because he'd mentioned it, and my mother had mentioned it. My mother had also mentioned that I may have a Vietnamese sibling somewhere in Vietnam. So I was aware of it, and I kind of did some research about Moroccan soldiers who had served in Morocco, and I kind of aligned the dates. And I was like, "Dad, how old were you when you were in Vietnam?" And he was like, "I think I was 18 or 19. So I kind of looked at the dates of the Vietnam War and kind of went back and kind of got a rough idea of my father's age.
Mm, wow, that's impressive. And then how did you find out about your grandfather then?
My mother mentioned it because she said that, her father had served with the Spanish and he had been injured when he came back. So,
Mm.
and I think, and she said, I think she mentioned that her mother used to sell flour and oil in a shop, in a small shop, and that's how they made their living. And my grandfather, I think he got a pittance of a payment from be Spanish, because I mean the soldier pension that was given to colonial people from the colonies was not the same as the money paid to Spanish soldiers.
Of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. That's amazing. I it is amazing that you're able to get that much information. Like, I keep trying to remember what medal my grandfather got for the war that he was in. And in my brain, I describe him like Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Because that's the story he told us before Forrest Gump ever came out. That was essentially, that's what happened. That whole like running back in, he was a medic. So going back in and helping, and everyone wanting his help while he was doing that. So I know that was sort of like what his job was.
Yeah.
He did not get shot in the bottom, but I do know he was medaled. But like I can't none of us remember at this point. I think my nieces remember better because someone told them and they kept that in their heads. But like, that's still incredible that you are able to like have that information and do the research about that. So that's that book sounds
I think
like
what it is at the moment is I'm doing some research, and some of it is sort of based on research, and some of it where there are gaps in the story, I kind of just have to use my imagination.
Of course. But that's still just it's amazing. That's like, I don't know that I could or would do that, but because I've written a memoir, but I purposefully skipped over my family, or as much as I could. But I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful that you are putting your family at the forefront, and that you are discussing your Moroccan culture. Do you also talk about being raised in London in your writing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have a strong connection to London, and I think, I always will. And I think, one of the, I suppose, one of the benefits of having like a duality, I suppose, is that you're able to pick the aspects of each culture that appeal to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I do that certainly with British culture and with Moroccan culture. There are aspects that I find unpleasant, and there are aspects that I absolutely love, and I just adopt the ones that make me happy.
That's awesome. Are you like from like downtown London, or is from like outsides of it? Or
I'm central. I mean, Notting Hill. I mean, Notting Hill Carnival goes right past my house during the summer.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. That's it's I'm really enjoying this conversation. I really am. I'm enjoying learning about you. How are your kids excited about your books, or
oh, bless them, yes they were. I mean they're thrilled. My son, who lives in York at York University, I mean, he called me up and he was like, I've just rounded up all my friends at university and we're going down to the shop and I'm making them all buy your book.
Now that's support.
Yes.
That is support. And that's awesome. I like, my dad's an artist and I'm always like, don't look at his pictures. Look at or skip some of the pictures. I was like, Dad, show them the good book. Because the stuff he puts in there is sometimes fascinating. So I'm always like, tread lightly when you look at stuff.
Artists are amazing. Sometimes I go out and I see the most beautiful scenery and I'm like, oh, I wish I could paint, just to capture the beauty of this. But unfortunately, I think my painting is done with words. Yeah.
That's incredible. So is there let me just make sure I did get through those questions. Okay. So yes, will you bless us with a poem?
Yes, I will. Absolutely. Thank you. No filter. This is me. Here I sit, growing into my age jacket, accepting my invisibility, rebuking my fragility. Am I irrelevant? Wearing my wrinkles as a sackcloth and ashes? Should I reinvent myself for the applause of the social media masses? Twittering on Twitter, showcasing shells on Insta, scrolling and trolling perfecting personas on FB, a photoshopping melee, a veil of airbrush sadness. I need more because I am less, filtering faces and not words, subsisting on praises, captive in light cages. The eyes that don't see me, the ears that don't hear me. Should I put on my filter and dance to the hollow beat of a digital trance? A pound of flesh under the knife, erasing evidence of a lived life, fattening up my lips and arse, a fatted calf as a stranger berates me in the looking glass. Are my eyebrows on fleek? Am I scathingly savage enough? Am I too woke or not enough? I log in and await your critique. Let's celebrate the cover and not the book. Post a pic as the panel rates you. Have an opinion and we hate you. Immersing ourselves in the virtual brook. I have wandered the London streets, donning my expiry as an invisibility cloak, as the gaze of the lit quickly retreats before dissolving into the city's big smoke. I have sat with Elliot as we shared despair, after shop-worn shared niceties, over tea and cakes and ices, exchanging troughs and peaks as we laughed and cried, bitching with Bukowski, waving to Sylvia as we died inside. Empty voices filling the space with speech, their flawless faces behind a screen, me out of touch, them out of reach. Where reality in the virtual scheme, I have haunted the void in between. Should I question the truth whilst believing the lie? The hordes flock to TikTok, famous for 15 minutes, to shock, to rock, to mock, to exhibit without limits. But I'm old and the light in their eyes has died. Thank you.
Wow. Just wow. And I was like, Eliot, so we're definitely talking about T.S. Eliot.
Yes.
Especially, and I put a question mark next to it. And once you said Sylvia, I was like, okay, we're talking about Sylvia Plath now. So I was like, okay, so you are a literary fan.
Yes, I am a huge literary fan.
You were not joking about readings. I'm like, okay, I see your names. I see your list of writers.
I'm a terrible bookworm for my sins.
I love it. I love it. So I have to ask this question because it's been in my head and you can totally tell me if it's none of my business. But I get a sneaking feeling that you are Gen X. Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
I was like, everything is telling me we are of the same generation. So I'm listening, and as you're reading the poem, like, we are both Gen X. We are both Gen X. I'm the very end of Gen X, so it also makes me a Zennial. But I'm listening to you going like, no, so let me correct you. We are not old. Not yet. They may be thinking we are.
I think, this poem was probably written when I started menopause and my children had left home and I kind of felt surplus to requirements. I was like, where do I fit in now?
No, I get that. And I've been trying and begging doctors to get rid of my uterus. So, but like now night sweating, I'm like, what? I was like, what is this? But it also was really hot last night. So every time I start sweating randomly, I go, Mom, what's the weather? Like, is it hot in this house? Is it me? Like, I can't figure out what's happening.
It's hard to tell.
In my whole body.
I started menopause in the summer and I was having hot flashes and I didn't even realize I was starting menopause. I just assumed I was overheating because it was hot.
Yeah, like I was like, the sweating feels a little different, but also no, it's really hot in this apartment right now. Like my room is hotter than the rest of the apartment. So I acknowledge that I was all night, I was really hot. And I was like, okay, no, my room is just really hot right now. Because I would walk out in the middle of the night and I was like, okay, the rest of the apartment is so much cooler than my room. So maybe the sweating is not just me switching over. I don't know what's happening. But either way, like whatever's happening. I don't think I'm there yet because I'm not having any other flashes. Nothing else is happening. But I'm just like, but some of my friends are peri. Some of my friends are already in menopause. I'm just like, what is that? I'm too young for this, aren't I? No, because again, my friends are all over the map in terms of where their body has done stuff. So I'm going, okay, I don't know what it is, but I'm listening to you. I'm listening to the poem. I'm just like, we're in the same generation. Like I'm saying, no, we're in the same generation. So yes, I hear you. I hear you. I love that poem. I love the just like, and then when you said on fleek, I was like, yeah, like we're in this like weird place. We're not part of, but we get it. But because like also for our generation, technology really grew up with us a little bit. So it's a weird thing that was happening for us. But then I love the whole literary references, and you have to know writing to know those people too, right? Like you have to catch those names. You have to know who they are. So
Yeah,
once you said Elliot, I was like, okay, London. All of a sudden I saw smoke going across the building like a cat, because that's the
yeah.
big thing, like T.S. Eliot and his cats. I was talking about cats yesterday to somebody too.
I'm a huge fan of T.S. Eliot. I mean, I think I've actually written a piece which is called A Response to the Loved Song of Alfred J. Prufrock, which is a female
Oh,
response to that particular poem. So yeah, I'm a huge Eliot fan.
that is awesome. I do have a book of T.S. Eliot on my shelf, and he was one of the first poets, one of the first classical poets that I got taught. But I also have an Allen Ginsberg book on my shelf,
Oh
and
my God,
one
Ginsberg.
of
I
my
actually mentioned him in one of my poems, actually. It's the one about diaspora, sort of, and he is mentioned in that as well. So yeah, I love Ginsberg. Amazing.
yeah, and then the whole Sylvia reference. I saw
Yeah.
that. I saw that one, Trapped In. Mm-hmm.
No, I think, Sylvia Plath had a special place in my heart when I was a depressed teenager. I mean, she spoke to me at that time.
She speaks a lot of people that way. There's a book called Negroland, and I ended up writing a poem using Negroland as part of the title. But it's written by, it's not a poetry book, but it's written by oh, her name just went straight out my head. She's a writer, but not this type of writing. Either way, Negroland, and she talks a lot about Sylvia Plath,
Yeah.
and so she talks about how Sylvia Plath was sort of in her head, in her own process of, she was obsessed with suicide. So she
Yeah.
ends up talking about Sylvia Plath a lot in the book.
I mean, I think Sylvia Plath is, sort of kind of monumental as a poet in the terms that she is one of the first female writers who actually wrote about mental health.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, she was successful at some point, but just the fact that she was putting that out there, and that's
Yeah.
what I think the writer was essentially saying. As a Black woman, I think she was obsessed with death and suicide because she didn't feel like it was something we had access to. Because we
Yeah.
always have the superhero complex, superwoman complex, and
Yeah.
so we always have to be everyone's hero, which means we cannot be talking about our own mental health
Yeah.
or
This is
any
the
of that
thing.
stuff. And so she was sort of juxtaposing herself to Sylvia Plath. And so it was interesting. And so I ended up writing a poem about mental health and using The Price of Negroland as the title. But because when I wrote
Wow.
the poem, didn't even think about Negroland. But by the time I finished looking at the poem, I was like, yes.
Sounds
Margot
amazing.
Jefferson is her name, the author of that book. It came back to me eventually. But I think we've covered everything for the most part. So the last two questions: how can we support your community? Is there a way in which you support your community?
How do we support our community? I think, we just continue as women and as human beings to uplift women, empower women, and allow them to feel that that there are space, create safe spaces for women to have their voices heard and to raise their concerns.
Amen to that. And then how do we support and follow you?
Well, I am n.chamchaoun on Insta and n.chamchaoun on Facebook. And also my book is available, COVID, The Wordy Wiles of a Mind Under Lockdown. Sorry, there we are. Here we are. That is also available at Micah Press, Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, and most good poetry retailers online.
Awesome. So this has been super amazing. Thank you everyone for listening in. Totally get this book. Please, please, please go run to the store now. Go get it. Definitely go follow Nayma. And thank you for listening. And also hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast. Engage with it. And I'm sure that she will respond as well, because most of our people who watch the podcast end up responding anyway. So follow, like, subscribe. You can even make the donation, choose that option on Spotify. But either way, do whatever. It is a pleasure to speak with our guest today. And I hope you listen in next time, where we have other cool people joining us on behalf of. Thank you, everyone.